Yeah, I think you can share now.
Okay, okay. All right. So is it visible to all of you?
Yeah, visible.
Okay, thank you, sir. All right. So actually, there are many things in your syllabus, and that's why I'm having to rush through each of these topics, just providing the basic idea about each of these different methods. But each of these methods are, in itself, it's a huge topic and requires a lot of understanding to, apply it in your research. So I hope that these discussions will actually orient you towards all these different methods, understand some of the basic differences among these different methods and how we can or where we can apply each of these methods. And later on, probably you will get a lot of time to learn each of these and do hands-on application of these methods. So today we will discuss phenomenological research. That's another major method of qualitative research that we consider, and we will discuss the very basic concepts of this particular approach, right? Okay, so phenomenology, unlike all the other methods which we have discussed, it's difficult to understand itself. If uh, the researcher wants to do a phenomenological approach, wants to take a phenomenological approach in this case, the researcher will have to have a very good understanding of the method itself and the different, steps and, how you can apply this or where you can apply this. All these, are very important to consider before applying the phenomenological approach. So it is concerned with the study of experience from the perspective of the individual. Bracketing taken for granted assumptions and usual ways of perceiving. Okay. Now, what does this mean when we are saying that it's the study of experience of, from the perspective of the individual? So this is a paradigm which is concerned with the personal knowledge and subjectivity, and this emphasizes the importance of personal perspective and interpretation. So the basic focus in this case is always on how the individuals or the participants, the subjects, they are perceiving a particular phenomena. Okay, that's the basic idea here. So here the researcher, it's not like the researcher is studying the phenomena from outside and trying to understand the different aspects of it. It's rather understanding the subjective experiences of those subjects, research participants who are there. So here, as such, they are powerful for understanding subjective experience, gaining insights into people's motivations, actions, cutting through the clutter of taken for granted assumptions and conventional wisdom. Okay, so the main idea is understanding what is driving a person to do something, okay, to act in a particular way. Okay, so understanding that is of paramount importance in phenomenological research. So pure phenomenological research seeks essentially to describe rather than explain, and to start from a perspective free from hypotheses or preconceptions. Here we are not bothered about the preconceptions or certain hypotheses, okay, certain speculations. Okay, we are not concerned about those. Rather, the basic idea is that hypothesis we form where we try to explain certain phenomenon, right? So suppose a researcher wants to understand why men rape, right? So in that case, maybe the researcher will try to focus on different hypotheses. Okay, because the basic idea is to understand why some particular phenomena is happening, why a particular event is happening, why a person is behaving in a particular way. Okay, like that. All right, but here we are not concerned about the explanation part. We are not concerned about the why. We are concerned about how. So how is something occurring? How is a particular phenomena taking place? Okay, how a person is behaving in a particular situation. That's the requirement. And that's why we focus mainly on the subjective experiences of the research participants. So we try to understand, we try to explore those experiences to understand what is happening, okay, rather than why is happening. Okay, a variety of methods can be used in phenomenologically based research, including interviews, conversations, participant observation, action research, focus meetings, and analysis of personal texts. Okay. All these can be important ways or methods through which we can conduct the phenomenological research. Basic characteristics, phenomenological research design is descriptive. Okay, the researcher here aims to describe as accurately as possible the structure of a phenomenon. Okay, what is the structure? What does happen when something like this happens? So maybe a phenomenological research is more suitable to understand why probably this under this pandemic, okay, when people are going for all types of virtual meetings and social isolation happened because of the pandemic, how can people behave in that type of a situation? What can happen? What can be the possible kind of phenomena that can happen because of that, right? So that is one of the basic characteristics of phenomenological research, that it is extremely descriptive in its approach. Qualitative phenomenological research design aims to uncover what a particular experience means to a group of people and how they experienced it. Right. So, for example, a researcher might try to understand that, when adolescents, when a child actually experiences puberty and goes into adolescence, okay, what happens? What kind of experiences happen for that particular adolescent, in that particular context? Okay, so the researcher might try to compare different cultures, maybe the adolescents in the Western society versus adolescents in the Asian countries, okay, versus adolescents in a tribal community, okay, like that. So across different communities, across different cultures, how adolescence comes, okay, this period is welcomed. What are the different subjective experiences that happen, okay, when a child reaches adolescence. So that can be a good way of a good research question for phenomenological research. Okay, so this approach requires researchers to set aside their prejudices and a priori assumptions and focus mainly on the immediate experience. Okay, immediately what is happening, on that part, the focus is on that part, and leaving aside all kinds of prejudices. Prejudices generally leads to certain kinds of researchers' bias. Okay, so that's why one needs to, the researcher needs to get rid of all those kind of prejudices for doing a phenomenological research. Okay. It requires the researcher to first describe the lived experience objectively, and then reflect on the description with reference to the existing theories about the phenomenon. Okay, so the basic idea is that the researcher wants to first describe what has happened in the person's life, okay, as a whole, daily life or whatever you consider, what has happened there, and then, reflect on the description with reference to the existing theories, how that can those theories can explain these different experiences, lived experiences of the people. Okay, so that's how it works. That's how it advances. So here, a focus is on the audience's interpretation of something. So the focus is always on what an experience or event means to a strictly defined audience and how they interpret its meaning. Okay, here audience means the particular community or members of those community who are being studied, right? A lack of researcher's bias or prior influence should be there. Okay, so the person should not have any type of researcher's bias. Descriptive emphasis on research insights is of importance here. So research reports tend to be of in-depth nature. Okay, so the researcher should describe the phenomenon through the eyes of the audience as comprehensively as possible. Connecting objectivity with lived experiences. Okay, so here researchers need to describe their observation of how the audience experienced the event, as well as how the audience interpreted the experience themselves. So the basic focus is on the subject's experience there. Okay, for example, a researcher might want to understand how trauma during childhood, how it can influence, or what is the kind of experience that the person experiences due to trauma. Okay, so the researcher might decide to interview a number of people and try to understand how their traumatic experiences, maybe in their childhood or some particular stage of their lives, how such kind of traumatic experiences influenced their overall behavior at a later stage, or their how it all shaped their life at a later stage. So that can be a good example of phenomenological research. Okay, certain examples. An example would be a study of the thoughts and experiences of family members waiting for a loved one who is undergoing major surgery. Okay, so caregivers, what is the kind of experience that they are having? I think one of my colleagues, actually worked in this area, and she, in her research, she took this phenomenological approach, and she actually studied the caregiver experience. In her case, the subjects were caregivers of children with autism. So she interviewed all those parents, okay, or the guardians who were there, and she tried to understand that what was the subjective experiences of the caregivers taking care of all those children with autism on a daily basis. Okay, so a lot of description went into that. Okay, so you see, the focus is not to understand why something is happening. It's obvious that a person who is taking care of a child with autism will face a lot of struggles on a daily basis, right? A lot of efforts that person will have to put. It's, of course, it is quite natural, but the researcher's focus is not to understand why that is happening. Okay, because it's an obvious thing. So what is happening? The focus is on that part. Okay, what is actually happening? So the phenomena, the subjective experience of those caregivers. Okay, all these different types of examples can be considered. This could provide insights into the nature of the event from a broader family perspective. This technique is also commonly used in branding research. Okay, here audiences' perceptions of the brand matter more than the business's perception of itself. So in branding research, market research also, they use a lot of phenomenological approach to understand that what is the subjective experiences or the perspectives of the customers about a particular brand. All right. So the brand itself might think, might have a very high opinion about itself, but what does the subject thinks, or what does the customers how they are perceiving the brand, that can be explored through their through understanding their subjective experiences. So that can be a matter of phenomenological research. Okay, so such kind of, the application is actually huge, in many understanding many types of social problems, even in clinical settings. I mentioned two of those, or to understand branding experiences. For all such cases, one can apply phenomenological research approach. Okay. Types of phenomenological research design. It can be existential phenomenology, it can be hermeneutic phenomenology, or it can be transcendental phenomenology. Existential phenomenology focuses on understanding the audience's experiences through their perspectives. Okay, so understanding the subject's own experiences through their own perspective. So generally by interviewing the person, asking them to describe their experiences, one can understand, and one can consider the existential phenomenological approach. Hermeneutic phenomenology, this one focuses on creating meaning from experiences through the audience's perspective. So here also we are considering the individual experiences, subjective experiences of the research participants. But here the main focus is on creating a meaning out of it. Okay, to understand what is happening, going into in-depth understanding of the subjective experiences. Okay. Transcendental phenomenology, this one focuses on how the phenomenon appears in one's consciousness on a broader scientific scale. Okay, so this actually focuses on a broader perspective. For example, in a particular community, how a particular lived experience work for the entire community as a whole. Okay, how they are perceiving it on a broader scale. Okay, so that's the transcendental phenomenology. These are actually the differences you will find in very specific philosophical orientation of each of these phenomenological research designs. But more or less all these actually consider the subject's experiences, lived experiences, as the primary source of their data. Okay. Methods of collecting data in phenomenological research: participant observation, interviews, conversations with participants, analysis of personal text, action research, and focus meetings, right? So we know each of these. The participant observation, of course, we have discussed that. I think in the very first class, we discussed what is participant observation. And later on also, you will see that in lot many other different types of qualitative research, we focus on participant observation. So as in ethnographical research. So in participant observation, we are the researcher is participating in the actions, in the different activities of the group along with the other study participants, and observing them as well, okay, simultaneously. So that's how it is, it occurs, right? Okay, interviews are, we will be discussing it in our next class, the different types of interviews. So there are many different types of interviews that we can conduct, and in order to understand the subject's understanding or their lived experiences. Conversations with different participants, so that is also considered as as one of the major data collecting method here. So the researcher can have specific conversations with participants in order to understand their subjective experiences. Analysis of personal text. Okay, personal text means where they are describing their own experiences. Okay, it can include a lot of different resources like the diary or certain notes for their own personal use, something like that, where the person's subjective experiences are described. It can be autobiography as well, something like that. Okay, all those different sources can be considered as personal text, and the researcher can analyze and interpret those personal texts to understand their subjective experiences, right? Uh, Action research. Action research is a type of method where the researcher's focus is not only to investigate a particular event or a phenomena, but also to solve a particular issue. Okay, so it also includes the problem solving aspect. Okay, so action research is something like which a type of method which bridges between the theoretical understanding of an event and the practical applications of a solution. Okay, so that's how it works. And these days action research is gaining a lot of popularity because of its practicability. Okay, so maybe an action research can be thought of in this way, that a researcher can try to understand the subjective experiences of a child with or children, a number of children with disabilities, certain form of disabilities, and maybe they are children who are deaf and dumb, and what are the kind of experiences that they go through. Okay, so the subject, so the researcher might interview all those children to understand that what is their own subjective experiences. Okay, what are the kind of difficulties that they are going through, okay, in their studies, in their curriculum, in their school experiences, like that. And based on those experiences, the researcher might try to provide a solution, okay, which can help them. All right, so that can be considered as an action research. Okay, and focus meetings. Focus meetings or focus interviews are types of it's a type of interview itself, but here the idea is that the researcher will not be interviewing one person at a time, but multiple persons at a time. Okay, so it can range from 3 to 21. Okay, that's the optimal number of participants you can consider for one session of focus group meeting. And there the researcher can talk about, ask them to describe their subjective experiences. So an example can be that a number of people who are they all of them, they have experienced maybe a personal loss. Okay, a loss of a family member or someone very close to them. Okay, so what is their subjective experience of that loss? Okay, so the researcher might conduct a focus group discussion in this case, and ask certain questions which are which are asked in those meetings as a whole, not to one specific individual at a time. And all the participants, they are asked to discuss, to describe their subjective experiences. And in the process, the researcher gets a lot of insight about how, what they are experiencing, how they are, adapting to all those experiences, and how they're coping, etc., etc. So that can be an example of focus group meeting, right? So all these different methods can be employed for conducting a phenomenological research. Okay. Steps generally, these three steps, broadly, we can say there are three steps. So intuiting, describing, and analyzing. So that's the very broad steps that we can consider. But there are many subtle steps also which you need to follow for the phenomenological research, for conducting phenomenological research. So these are some of the procedures that one can follow. First, identification of the phenomenon. Okay, so identification of the phenomenon actually starts with understanding or recognizing a particular phenomena that the researcher can study. Okay, can consider for that phenomenological research. Okay, now as we discussed that phenomenological research mainly focuses on describing a phenomena or an event rather than explaining it. So when you are considering or trying to identify a problem, a research problem for your phenomenological research, you have to make sure that that particular problem is actually something that requires a description, not an explanation. Okay, so identification is the first first step in this case. Second, development of a detailed description of the phenomenon. Okay, development of the detailed description. Now, once you consider the phenomena, you have to provide a detailed description of the problem itself, of the phenomena itself. Okay, so what are the different things which you already know about it? Okay, so for example, a researcher wants to understand how people cope with trauma. Okay, or maybe childhood abuse. Okay, how they cope with it. So fine, so that's the research problem here identified. Now, what do they already know about this particular event? Okay, this particular phenomena. When we are seeing that childhood abuse, okay, what are the usual symptoms of it? What are the usual experiences that people go through if they had experienced childhood abuse at an early stage of their lives? Okay, so based on that, you have to develop a detailed description of the phenomena itself. What is childhood abuse and how all those things are described existing in the existing literature, and what all things is not described, is not known, not explored. Okay, so all those things will come into this detailed description. Then bracketing personal prejudices and a priori assumptions. Okay, so this one means that leaving aside all your prejudices, all your pre-assumptions about that particular event that you have or phenomena that you want to study. So maybe it can be that a researcher might the general assumption that we consider here is that a person who had some kind of childhood, who had experienced some kind of childhood abuse, will be traumatized and will have relationship issues. Okay, but that is the preconception that we are talking about. It may not be the same case. It can be something different as well. Okay, the manifestations of that existing trauma can be something else altogether. We do not know, right? So you have to set aside all those different assumptions, and then you have to move ahead with your research. In the next step, collection of data from the participants. So we just discussed what are the different methods through which we can collect data. So a phenomenological research can employ any of these different methods that we just discussed for collection of data. Okay. Then data analysis. This usually involves reading the data, demarcating the data, eliminating irrelevancies, okay, grouping and naming data into constituents, arranging the data into themes that accurately and fully describe the participants' lived experiences. What does this mean? First, it starts with reading the data. What all data you have already received? you have already collected. Okay, so as we discussed, there are many different methods through which we can be collecting data. It depends upon our research question. So for example, if we consider this particular example here, that researcher wants to understand the lived experiences of a person with childhood abuse, maybe interview will be a good way of collecting data. Conducting interviews, maybe focus group discussions, okay, understand, and maybe analyzing personal texts. Okay, all those can be, all these different methods, 2-3 different methods can be employed for collecting data. Now, once your data is collected, you start reading the data. Okay, reading the data means where you are trying to understand what you have got in your data collected. Okay, so it starts with transcribing the data. So transcribing means where you are writing it down. You're creating textual data from the interviews and the focus group discussions and all those things that you are considering for your data collection, right? So you are reading the data. Once the textual data is present with you, you are reading it. Demarcating the data means where you have to, it's kind of considering categories and subcategories among the in the data itself. So you have say for example, you have data from 5 different individuals, 5 different subjects, right? And you had considered 4 questions for each of these 5 different subjects, right? Now demarcating data means where you are where you are trying to understand the categories. Okay, so for the first question, what was the response of the 5 different persons? For the second question, what was the response for the 5 different persons? Like that. Okay, eliminating irrelevancies, all those irrelevant words that were considered in the textual data, those needs to be removed. Okay, because those can be distracting. Those can produce certain kinds of distractions in the data for the researcher to understand, and that's why it is better if you can just remove all those irrelevant information which you got from that data. Then grouping and naming the data into constituents. So you are finally you are breaking down the entire data into its different constituents, right? Arranging the data into themes, right? So here again we talk about themes. So we try to understand how each from this entire data set, how each of the themes are emerging. So it can be possible that you have 7 to 8 different sub themes emerging from the entire set of data, and from that 7 to 8 different sub themes which you have got, you are finally coming to 1 or 2 specific core theme which will describe the person's lived experiences, and finally you describe it in details. Okay, so that's the data analytic procedure that is involved in phenomenological design. Then in the next step, development of a composite description of the phenomenon. So once you are done doing the analysis of the data itself, you try to develop comprehensive description of the phenomena itself based on the lived experiences described by the subjects, right? So for example, in this case, in this particular research where the researcher is trying to understand the lived experiences of people who had experienced child abuse, there you try to form a composite description of the phenomena. What is that phenomena? That how child abuse or the trauma due to child abuse influences adult behavior or adult way of life. Okay, that's the phenomena. So you develop a composite description, a comprehensive description of this particular phenomena based on the data collected based on the entire lived experiences which you explored, right? Presentation of the description, that's the final part where you are reporting your research results, okay, where you are presenting the description of the phenomena in a very objective scientific way. Okay, so these are the in detail procedures involved in phenomenological design. Uses of qualitative phenomenological research. Where can we use it? Well, research lived experiences of human beings and gain insight into their actions and motivations. So all those different contexts or settings where the human experiences will help gain insight into the actions and motivations of those people, there you can apply phenomenological research because it can broaden their knowledge about a certain phenomenon. It can create awareness, okay, this phenomenological research or inquiry, because it is focusing on describing a particular phenomenon, an event. This will actually help create awareness about a particular phenomenon. Okay, what happens in a phenomenon? All right. Clarifying the relationships between lived experiences and the theories used to explain those experiences. Okay, so what is the relationship among these different lived experiences? How one aspect of someone's lived experience is affecting the other aspect. Okay, so that is clarified using phenomenological research and the theories used to explain it. What are the existing theories? Sometimes it leads to the development of newer theories, because this new lived experiences actually gives rise to newer insights, and based on those newer insights, one can come up with a new theory for explaining those experiences. So that is possible. Finally, it contributes to the development of new theories. So phenomenological research can actually influence a lot of different benefits, research benefits, which includes development of a new theory, clarification of this experiences among lived experiences, creating awareness, okay, broadening knowledge about a particular phenomenon, okay, gaining insights into someone's actions, motivations. All these can be inquired through phenomenological research. Okay. Limitations. Well, apart from the different uses and applications of phenomenological research, we also need to understand the limitations of phenomenological research as a whole. Okay. So first is researcher-induced bias can affect the outcome of the study. That is one of the major limitations, because we are focusing on subjective experiences only, and we are trying to understand the description of a phenomenon rather than the explanation part. The researcher might end up having some bias from his or her own part, okay, regarding that particular description. Second, it could be difficult to establish validity and reliability when using this research approach. You may remember that in our previous class, we were discussing ethnographic research and narrative research. So there I was talking about how we can establish the reliability and validity of qualitative research approach. So there are different methods, different strategies are there. The most common strategies include, first is, once you are describing the subjective experiences of a number of participants, you share it with the participants itself and ask them to tell you whether it's a good description or it's a appropriate description of their lived experiences or not. Okay. That is one strategy, and the other one is you give it to an expert review panel and ask those experts to analyze the different codes and themes used in the interpretation part, and then try to check or evaluate what is the whether the interpretation that has been done, whether it is a good interpretation or not. So those are different ways of how we can establish the reliability and validity of a qualitative research. But in phenomenological approach, it is very difficult to establish this. Why? Because this type of analysis does not really focus on, or does not really rely on coding, different methods, data analytic methods like coding, or understanding categories, themes, memoing, which we discuss in different other methods, right? So here the focus is to focus is on describing what has happened. That's it, right? So the use of those field notes, memoing, coding, etc. in the other methods actually provide a lot of opportunity for an objective description of a particular event, right? But here, since all those different methods we are not using in the data analytic aspect or part, what happens is that this subjective experience or the lived experiences that the researcher is describing is very much open to researcher's bias, right? So that's why it is very difficult to establish the validity and reliability of this particular research approach, right? Maintaining pure bracketing can be very challenging for the researcher. Remember that we, in this particular method, in this particular approach, we need to bracket, the researcher needs to bracket his or her own biases, pre-assumptions, okay, prejudices, all those things, right? So what we we can see in this particular approach is that it's very difficult to maintain this pure bracketing, this complete lack of prejudice or pre-assumption that we are asking the researcher to do is very difficult. Okay. Participants of the research may not be able to express their views articulately due to the factors like language barrier, age, or cognition. Sometimes it happens that, because of all these different demographic factors like language or age or cognition. Cognition means the understanding of a particular aspect, particular concept, particular phenomena. Maybe it is possible that the participant himself or herself is not able to describe or express their experiences in a better way. Okay, so that can also be a problem in this case. Okay. Presenting the findings of phenomenological research can be difficult because the results are highly qualitative. Okay, as we discussed, we do not make use of coding or memoing or filled notes in this case, and that's why everything is based on the qualitative description that the researcher is giving. Okay, so that's why it is completely qualitative, and that's why it is very difficult to present the findings in a nice way. It requires a lot of experiences and understanding of the method itself to do a good presentation. Finally, data gathering and analysis in phenomenological design may be daunting and time consuming. However, you can save yourself the time and stress of dealing with the large amount of data involved in phenomenological research design by using different tools to organize, analyze, and gain more insights in your data and improve the validity of your research. Okay, so there are today, these days there are many different softwares that are available, like NVivo, okay, which can provide a good way of analyzing the data in qualitative research. So phenomenological designs actually require a lot of time and effort on the part of the researcher to deal with this huge amount of data collected through different ways and to analyze that data. So one can take help of such kind of softwares and tools to organize the data and make sense of it. Right? Okay. There is a confusion sometimes between these two different approaches, the phenomenological research design that we just discussed and the interpretative phenomenological analysis, IPA. Okay, so these two are different. There is a very subtle difference between these two different approaches. Let's see. Phenomenological research design actually focuses on exploring the essence of human experiences and understanding the meaning people attribute to those experiences. It seeks to capture the underlying structures and core aspects of these experiences without imposing preconceived theories or interpretations, right? So we are focusing on lived experiences of people, and we try to understand how people perceive those experiences. What do they attribute this to, right? And we try to, the researcher should be bracketing, what we call bracketing in this case, bracketing of their own preconceptions and other preconceived theories, pre-assumptions, in order to understand the core aspects of those experiences. So that's what we do in phenomenological research design. On the other hand, in interpretative phenomenological analysis, it's a very specific qualitative research approach which is rooted in phenomenology. IPA aims to deeply understand individual experiences by examining how participants interpret and make sense of those experiences within their unique contexts. Unlike traditional phenomenology, IPA acknowledges the role of the researcher's interpretation while aiming to remain close to participants' perspectives. Right? So both these different approaches share a focus on exploring human experiences. IPA adds an interpretative layer that examines participants' sense-making processes within their social and cultural context. So this particular approach, the IPA approach, also considers the researcher's understanding of the phenomena itself, of the individual experiences itself, right? So this one is based on phenomenological approach, but it adds one additional aspect to it, that is the researcher's interpretation of the participants' perspectives. Okay, so it's a very subtle difference that you will find, but more or less it's the same thing. It's the methods, the data collection procedure, the interpretation ways in which it is interpreted, all those are more or less the same in both the research approaches. Okay, so I'll stop here, and now it is open to questions. If you have any specific question, please feel free to ask. Okay, so seems like there are no further questions. So over to you, sir, and Farham.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am, for explaining the topics in so much of detail. Sir, do you want to add something, or shall we close the session?
See, we started today a little late, maybe 10 minutes, so we can consider those 10 minutes. So I can start with the interview technique, or, because it's already 9, maybe in the next class, we can start with the new topic. I think that will be better.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. You can take the next topic in next class, ma'am.
Yes,
Ma'am,
yes,
it's up to,
yes.
yeah, it's up to you, ma'am.
All right. So I'll start the next topic in the next class. That's on Wednesday.
Okay, ma'am.
So,
Okay, thank you.
all right. So I think then you can close. So thank you
Okay, ma'am.
everyone for your patient listening. Good night.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye. Good night, ma'am. Take care. Good night, students. Take care.